Every empire leaves a record. Some records were never meant to be found. This is file No. 001. Within roughly one lifetime, every great power of the Eastern Mediterranean was gone. Not conquered, gone. Palaces burned, the writing stopped, and the trade routes that fed millions simply went dark. The official account gives you a villain. Mysterious raiders from the sea peoples who swept in and toppled an age. It's a clean story. It fits on a temple wall. And when you actually read the archive, it starts to fall apart. Because a single enemy does not erase 4 civilizations at once, across 1,000 kilometers, in a few short decades. Something else was happening. Something the sources only show you if you stop looking for a villain and start looking for a pattern. And the record of this collapse survived for one reason. It was baked into clay by the fire that destroyed it. To understand the fall, you have to understand what fell. Around 1200 BC, the Eastern Mediterranean was not a scatter of isolated kingdoms. It was a connected system, arguably the first true international order in recorded history. Consider the players. In Egypt, the New Kingdom pharaohs. In Anatolia, the Hittite Empire, ruling from the fortress capital of Hattusa. On the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans, with their palace citadels at Mycenae and Pylos. On Cyprus, the copper island the Egyptians called Alashia. And on the Syrian coast, the merchant city of Ugarit, a port so wired into the world that its scribes wrote in multiple languages and kept a diplomatic correspondence that reads, frankly, like email. We know they talk to each other because we have their letters. Kings addressed each other as brother. They exchanged gold and lapis lazuli and marriage alliances and gifts of grain in a crisis. The earlier Amarna letters from Egypt already show this diplomatic web a century before. Now here is the fault line hidden inside all that sophistication. This entire world ran on bronze, and bronze is an alloy, copper, which was relatively available, plus tin, which was not. The nearest large tin sources were staggeringly far away. Some of it likely came from as far as Central Asia. To arm a soldier, to cut a harvest, to build a palace, you needed a supply chain that stretched across the known world. Cut the chain, and the age loses its edge, literally. So picture it, prosperity built on distance, a globalized economy 3,000 years before the word existed. Powerful, and quietly, structurally, fragile, and then, in the archive, the tone changes. The letters stop sounding like diplomacy. They start sounding like distress calls. Let's start with the villain, because we have to deal with him honestly. Around 1177 BC, in the 8th year of the pharaoh Ramesses III, Egypt records a great battle against a coalition of foreign peoples coming by land and sea. On the walls of his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, the invaders are named and carved in stone. The inscription claims that no land could stand before them, and lists the fallen Hatti, Carchemish, Arzawa, Alashia. That date, 1177, is our marker. Not because the world ended in a single year, it didn't, but because it's the one moment where a surviving power looked the catastrophe in the face and wrote it down. Here's the problem. Read that inscription like an investigator, not a fan. It's a monument. It's propaganda, carved by the one king who survived to celebrate a victory. And it raises more questions than it answers. Who were these people? Where did a coalition large enough to erase empires suddenly come from? Displaced peoples don't appear from nowhere. They're usually running from something. So let's follow the something. Go to Ugarit, the great Syrian port. The city was destroyed and never truly reoccupied. And in its ruins, archaeologists found clay tablets that had been baked hard by the very fire that ended the city. Among the last texts, a plea. A message describing enemy ships that had appeared, that had done damage, and a coastline left exposed. These are, quite literally, some of the last words of a dying city, preserved because it died in flames. But look closer at the Ugarit correspondence, and the picture widens beyond raiders. There are letters about grain, desperate requests to move food, urgent as life and death, up toward the Hittite lands. Why would an empire beg for grain? This is where the raider theory cracks, because now we have to talk about the sky. For a long time, climate was a guess. It isn't anymore. Scientists have drilled sediment cores from lakes and lagoons across the region, Cyprus, the Syrian coast, the Sea of Galilee, and read the ancient pollen trapped in the layers. The pollen tells you what grew and what stopped growing. And the signal from multiple independent cores points the same way. A period of prolonged drought and cooling settling over the eastern Mediterranean right around the collapse window. Now the grain letters make sense. Now the migrations make sense. Drought doesn't just starve a kingdom in place, it puts whole populations on the road and on the water looking for food. The sea peoples may not have been an invading nation. They may have been refugees with weapons, the collapse's symptom, not only its cause. And still we're not done, because there's a third eliminator. Some argued it was earthquakes, an earthquake storm, a cluster of major quakes rippling along the fault lines and toppling the palaces. And there is physical destruction at multiple sites that looks seismic. But here's the discipline of the record. An earthquake cracks a wall. It does not stop the writing for centuries. It does not sever a trade route from Afghanistan to Greece. It does not empty a capital like Hattusa, whose people appear to have carried off their most sacred objects and simply left, in what looks less like a massacre than a managed evacuation of a place that could no longer sustain them. So test the single cause theories one by one. Raiders alone, too many fronts, too far apart. Drought alone, kingdoms survive bad harvests all the time. Earthquakes alone, they don't erase writing, memory, and trade. Each theory explains one wall of the house. None of them explains why the whole house came down at once. And that is the clue that's been sitting in front of us the entire time. Stop asking what hit them. Ask why one hit was enough. Here is the case the record actually supports. The very thing that made this world great, its interconnection, is what killed it. Run the cascade. Drought reduces harvests across several regions at once. Hungry populations move, by land and sea, and press on the coastal kingdoms. Raiding and instability make the sea routes unsafe. Unsafe routes choke the tin trade. And remember, without tin there is no bronze, no tools, no weapons, no economy. The palace system, which controlled that trade centrally, loses the surplus it needs to hold power. Central authority weakens, internal unrest rises, and a weakened kingdom can no longer help its neighbor. So when it begs for grain, no grain comes. Do you see it? Each failure pulls the next one down. This is not a chain of separate disasters, it is a single event with many faces, a systems collapse. In a tightly coupled network, you don't need every node to fail. You need enough of them to fail together, and the connections that made everyone rich become the wires that carry the collapse from house to house. The empires were not too weak to survive a shock. They were too connected to survive it separately. That is the finding. That is what the archive has been trying to tell us under the noise of the villain story. This was history's first recorded network collapse, and the aftermath fits the theory grimly well. When the tin roots died, iron, whose ore you can dig locally, slowly took their place, not because it was better at first, but because the world that supplied bronze was gone. The palaces didn't come back. In Greece, even the writing was lost. For roughly 4 centuries, a genuine dark age. Now hold that model up to a mirror and be honest about what looks back. A world of specialized economies, no one self-sufficient. Wealth built on long, thin supply lines carrying a few critical materials across the globe. Prosperity that depends on every link staying intact. A climate under strain. Populations that move when the land fails them. The people of 1200 BC did not think their world could end. It was old, it was rich, it was connected. It felt permanent. The temple walls still stood after the fall. The letters still lay in the ash. But the system that gave them meaning was gone, and the survivors could no longer even read the writing their grandparents left behind. Complexity is not the same as strength. Sometimes complexity is exactly the thing that breaks. The Bronze Age didn't die because the world was primitive. It died because, in one specific and very modern sense, the world was too advanced to fail alone. The record remains. Draw your own conclusions. This was File No. 001. The archive stays open. In file no 002, we stay with the theme of collapse and turn to another civilization that vanished not with an invasion, but with a silence its own records can't fully explain. Subscribe and keep the files open.